to a special episode of the Property Show coming to you from NatCon 2022 from Yas Island, Abu Dhabi. Now, 1,300 plus developers have got together here, which makes it the largest convention of real estate developers from India. They've made three important commitments. Number one, that they will now focus more on tier 2, tier 3 cities, and $3 billion fund of HDFC Capital. Some amount of it will go into developing housing and the right kind of projects in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Another $100 million fund would be set aside for Proptech accelerator to look at early growth stage companies. And number three, and the most important, as COP27 is happening, that the real estate sector in India will go carbon neutral by 2050. These are tall commitments made. I'm going to speak to many of the key leaders to understand and go a little below the surface to find out how will they achieve it and how will that impact the housing sector of India. So stay with me. Let's get some insights from thought leaders of the industry, Anuj Puri and Vipul Roongta. Anuj, let me start with you because the mood seems to be very upbeat on housing sales, right? All the developers that I'm meeting are actually smiling. And you've come out with a report which says that housing sales are going to probably cross the 2013-14 levels. Is that going to happen this year despite interest rates hike?
So Manisha, it is amazing what's happening. So don't ask me more questions on that. But it is amazing the way the data is coming out. 2022, the first 9 months of this year, has already crossed the sales of 2021 for the full year. We believe that 2022 will cross the previous peak of 2014. And on the other hand, you have all the global headwinds coming in, the interest rates, going up, liquidity is getting squeezed, and the challenges that are emerging at least at a global level and certainly at an India level with the mortgage rates going up. Yet the sales continue to remain, absolute robust. Diwali was one of the best in a decade that we have seen. So there is a bit of a dichotomy going on in there but it is true that the sales has been exceptional at this moment in time.
All right, Vipul, how are you looking at sales in top 7 cities versus tier 2 cities? Because CREDAI also said that out of not the entire $3 billion, of course, but some amount of the $3 billion fund of HDFC Capital will go into tier 2 cities housing projects.
Yeah.
Do you see that happening?
Oh yes, in my opinion, the growth is not coming from only the top 7 cities, like is probably happening in every sector in India. The growth is coming from tier 2 cities. See, there is nothing called a single big tier 1 city. A tier 1 city today is a conglomeration of 10, 15 tier 2 towns which are in a radius of 150 to 200 kilometers. And I think one aspect that the industry generally ignores and is now bearing the benefits of is the roads. The road sector, the rapid progress that has happened has brought these so-called tier 1.5, tier 2, tier 2.5 towns almost into the main town. And you couple that with what is happening on COVID, what is happening on work from home, despite the fact that some corporates are calling their employees back. But irrespective, now the demand that we are seeing in peripheral areas of tier 1 or the tier 2 towns is significantly good. That's one. We think that the developers also, because ultimately India is a supply constrained economy. Demand has never been the issue. Can you make the right kind of supply, right kind of quality products profitably is the issue. And I think because more and more developers are getting integrated into the ecosystem, things are getting easier, financing is relatively easier, so you are getting players who want to become big. Cleaner players are coming onto the table, which is increasing the overall confidence of the buyer and lenders. To your point about HDFC Capital committing to the thing in terms of tier 2 towns, we are very bullish. We think that the next almost one third of our growth is gonna come from beyond the top 10 cities, and we're talking about tier city number 10 to city number 50. I'm not talking about city number 8 to 12. Like Anuj, when his team does the data, please see that the data are always saying top 7 cities. So I would request Anuj also to start doing some data analysis on city number 8 to 15, because I think in COVID, post-COVID period, maximum rate of growth has been in these tier 2 towns.
Okay. So let me come to you on Proptech, right? So $100 million. According to me, CREDAI is waking up a little bit late, or maybe not. Proptech is just about finding its spot in the sun in India. And you've been supporting Proptech very, very closely, both from investments and from also mentoring them. Um, Recent report has happened. You've done a Proptech competition. Give me a flavor of where do you see the excitement, the areas of Proptech you see excitement in, Vipul?
See, like it happens in a lot of things related to tech, and like I personally have a problem managing my iPhone also. I find it pretty complicated. But notwithstanding that, I think there is talk of tech and there is what you're doing with that tech. A lot of talk, I think, has been happening, especially in the real estate context, whether it's customer experience, whether it is sales process, whether it is construction technology. I think more is happening on WhatsApp in this rather than what is happening on the ground. And at HDFC, our whole focus has been that how can we nudge as a financer, how can we nudge the industry towards adopting these technologies. Now, the problem that came there is that, and it's a valid question, you know, construction business is a tough business to do, as any developer will say, across too many stakeholders. Now, if you are trying to bank on a critical component of your construction process on a so-called startup, and there are so many, it becomes a little bit of a confidence gap. So what we are trying to do is to build that confidence, set up an entire ecosystem where the lenders, the startup innovations, the corporates, that is the developers, and even financiers, institution financiers, domestic and corporate, they come on the same thing, including research institutions and academic institutions, and create a melting pot so that if I have a top innovation, then here is the industry which will adopt. So our whole focus is adoption. On your thing about $100 million, right size, not size, I think it's a very good start. Personally, I think it's a very good start. I think they'll have a tough time even deploying $100 million like we were discussing, because the depth will come from adoption. If
Not
I
just from ideas.
Not just from ideas, I think getting pre-series A an idea thing in the Indian context even today is a relatively easy part. I think the thing comes when for the next 3 years you show growth of 50% and 70% or 100% compounded. Where do you get that from? That I think is the critical factor, and that will decide the men's and the boys and the women and the girls.
Women and the girls.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you made it gender neutral. All right, Anuj, on PropTech, your thoughts, because I know that you've also started investing in PropTechs. You're constantly looking at the universe to say who could be the big winners, who could, if adopted by the industry, grow into the next unicorn, right? Where do you think is the excitement? Are there certain ideas that you think will work better, get adopted faster?
So, Manisha, as Vipul said, is that PropTech has just started, and we are actually late entrant into the tech game. If you look at the other sectors of the economy, they have been disrupted by tech. Whether it is food delivery or taxi service, several of these have got disrupted by the tech. Real estate is such a large sector and a big contributor of the economy, and we haven't really been able to disrupt it. And it's not only in India, by the way, it's also in mature markets that there are a lot of people who are getting into the prop tech. But as Vipul said, is that the adoption has largely been negligible. In that is because I think in this industry you have alpha males and alpha females, and they know exactly how to do it, and tech can't really teach them as much. I do feel is that the time is right now where you will see disruption coming in through technology. As Vipul rightly said, is whether it's on the construction side, whether it's on the sales side, whether it's on the design side, you are going to see. Many people are trying to do beautiful things the way that they are either aggregating or disrupting.
On sustainable solutions, there's so much happening.
So much happening. I mean, Vipul was explaining it to me. People are now producing sort of water from thin air in terms of the sustainability is. So clearly, that is where my thought is that it is set to disrupt because every other industry has got disrupted. We can't be divorced. We can't say that we are amongst the major contributors of the global economy and yet tech is not going to disrupt us. Tech will disrupt. It is only, I feel, exactly what Vipul said, adoption is a big challenge in our industry just because the DNA of the stakeholders within this industry is such where they have been very successful in doing what they have been doing it traditionally. I just think it is either the new generation who's going to come in and adopt it, or they will start to see is that the existence in the business is going to become limited if they do not adopt tech.
All right. Vipul, do you think that the financier such as HDFC has a very big role both in driving Proptech and particularly sustainability through Proptech? Because this is a massive commitment. We are going to, as an industry, become carbon neutral by 2050, and we are actually only 5% of India's built environment is currently even IGBC or any other rated project. So 95% is still not sustainable. What is the role that financiers such as HDFC will play, and how seriously will you push them to do it?
So first of all, a little correction, because the data is not as stark as it says. 95% of existing stock, not 95% of current unbuilt stock or under construction stock.
Yeah, 5% of India's current stock, right?
Yeah, but what is being constructed, we believe that almost two-third of that is much more green than what it was earlier. That's A. But coming to the role, as an organization, as a group, we are very, very committed. We have multiple initiatives done as far as the green pushing and nudging the investee companies towards green is concerned. We have a green bond that we have with a large multilateral that has for sustainable, affordable housing. The private equity arm that we are part of, we are one of the only ESG compliant real estate fund. Um, I think at a fundamental level, the role of a financier and institution is paramount. At the same point of time, we are very cognizant of the fact that we are at the end of the day lenders, and it's initiatives like through industry bodies, through other thought leadership initiatives that we can nudge the industry. And the initiative that we are trying to do under Tech Innovators is also not about a institution. It's about the entire lending industry. It's about the entire financing industry, and that's the whole idea, as Anuj said, to increase adoption. And I think that's probably the single word answer to the larger question of sustainability.
Sustainability. Vipul Roongta, Anuj Puri, thank you so much for joining me today. And of course, we will move on to our next conversation. There are very big commitments made on whether it's tier 2 cities or PropTech or even sustainability. And of course, the more number of developers we pin down to those promises, the better are the results that we're likely to see. Stay with me. episode of the Property Show from NatCon 2022. The industry, of course, is keeping its fingers crossed that the mood remains buoyant when it comes to sales numbers, but they're also facing a situation or looking at a situation where the recession could come in 2023. Job layoffs are already making news in the IT sector, and home loan interest rates have risen quite a bit and likely to rise a little bit more. How will the industry shelter or shield itself from all of that? Let's have some more conversations. I have senior leaders of CREDAI with me. Let's get to the bottom of what's really happening with the sector right now. Mr. Irfan Razack and Harsh Vardhan Patodia. Mr. Razack, first question over to you. Bangalore, fantastic market, but it's now also looking at a scenario with that home loan interest rates are rising, inflation is continuously high, and there are tech layoffs which are making people and youngsters who are likely to buy homes a bit nervous. Do you think any of this is going to affect? Because the mood seems to be very buoyant here. Most developers are saying sales have been excellent in all of 2022 so far.
Morning, Manisha. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and it's a pleasure for me to be here in Abu Dhabi in this NatCon. Relevant points you have brought up. Yes, the last 2 years have been amazing in terms of sales revenue. More than anything else that I find, and I'm always amused on that, is if you look at the year-on-year growth of every developer, including listed players, the growth has been there. It's just been going up. So it's not as though it's just happened immediately, just now. What has changed is post-COVID, everybody started realizing that they need to create an asset for themselves, for their family. So that is the catalyst. Now you brought up 2 points. One was on the interest rate increase. The second is the job layoffs. Now, contrary to expectations, again, perceptions and reality. Now, what's happened is after COVID, or when COVID happened, even I was fearful that, God, COVID has come, lockdowns will happen. Will this mean that business will stop? Will this mean that layoffs will happen? Will this mean that people won't be able to pay their EMIs, and then we'll have a subprime crisis like it happened in 2008 in the US? But it happened the opposite. Then I started realizing that the entire world is looking at us. When I say at us, looking at India. Because I believe that India has got the maximum potential, maximum opportunities for all the global companies to come here, cost benefits, and the jobs just grew. People sat at home, technology helped. They started working from home. They also did 2 jobs and 3 jobs, something what you call moonlighting. But it happened. They actually enhanced the entire the revenues for themselves personally, and things happened positively. And now the jobs will not go away. Now the second part on the interest, yes. Now, what happens if the interest rate does go up, home loan rate go up, the EMI portion. So, I always say if you borrow 100,000, what is the EMI you pay? Now, that has slowly gone up northwards. It's not gone up so high that for it to become unaffordable. See, on one side, it's not only the interest rates, the input costs have gone up, the land cost has gone up, the entire cost of construction has gone up. So, the product itself has become that much more costlier. But we are struggling all the time, every time, how to protect our bottom line, at the same time give an offering to the customer which is affordable.
Mr. Razack has just encapsulated the 2 big questions, that rising interest rates, the EMIs still haven't become unaffordable, and the second most important part, that layoffs are nothing to worry about. India will probably continue to create jobs. But let me come to you with the commitments that you've made, especially tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? Mr. Harsh Vardhan, do you believe tier 2, tier 3 cities are ready for big developers such as you, or that you need to support the smaller developers there to become big, and there is growth potential in these cities?
Manisha, I definitely admit there's a huge growth potential in these cities. And if India has to be a 5 trillion economy or the third largest economy in the world. The growth has to come from there in terms of job creation and also built infrastructure. Yes, there will be two hybrid model. Need to support the existing developers there, and some of the large developers need to go there to change the entire benchmark and standard of scale, which is not there in those cities today. See, real estate has been speculative. If you look at 20 years before in 8 metropolitan cities, we didn't have the same kind of attraction or demand. Even Bangalore or Pune before about 25 years ago did not have something like this. So I think we are at the cusp of huge growth in these cities in terms of aspirations of the people living there. And with geography being little less relevant because of work from home and the opportunities people are getting there, there's going to be huge growth. We are very confident there's going to be huge growth in these cities. Yes, it will take time. It won't be overnight. But I think we have to start the process to see that infrastructure is available to suit the aspiration of the customer.
Okay.
Today we think that there is a huge demand. If you look at, we have a session today in the afternoon where people from different spheres of the industry will come and talk about what they are seeing as demand in these kind of cities. So you'll get a better picture there. But we definitely feel, CREDAI feels that there will be huge growth in those cities.
The second most important question, 2050, CREDAI as a body has said that, all its members are committing to carbon neutrality. Harsh Vardhan ji, that's a very big promise you've made. Do you think you'll be able to move the needle on that with all the members of the industry? Because this sector still has very, very large players like you, but also smaller developers who might find it harder to move to sustainability as a goal.
Manisha, it's a very tough call that we have made, but we have to start the thinking, start the process. And I think it will slowly permeate from the larger cities to smaller cities, larger developers to smaller developers. But I think once this ecosystem starts, people will hitch on to the bandwagon. And I think CREDAI as a body, we need to kind of educate, train, and change the entire attitude of developers across India to kind of adopt this whole thing. And I think this is uh, inevitable that we have to do it for the people of the planet. If we have to survive and if we have to do business, we have to live. And I think this is a necessity, and CREDAI will do its best to do it.
We are signing off from a conference which is much better in terms of mood, sales, demand for housing, and hoping that the rising interest rates or any sort of a global slowdown does not turn the mood sour. And of course, the big commitments that they've made, the industry has the responsibility of fulfilling them those. Goodbye. Thanks so much for watching.